Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investments, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives to increase your wealth monetarily and educationally.
This is Fergus Hodgson with the Gold Newsletter Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We have a fascinating and perplexing topic today, the Brexit. I call it a debacle, but I'm not sure what our guest, how he will describe it. So I've recruited Tom Colsy to explain the situation. His position is the president and co-founder of the Liberty Union at the University of Kent. And he's also taking up a position soon at the Taxpayers Alliance. He's a contributor to various outlets, and he has, associated with, broadly speaking, with Students for Liberty and Brexit for Students. And he's been publishing on this topic. I've seen him all over Twitter. So, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Fergus.
Mate, what on earth is going on over there? We observe, I'm over in Canada right now, and we just observe a debacle. That's what I was saying. Almost 3 years, right? So this was 2016 when this referendum took place.
And it appears we've got nowhere.
Yeah, and so basically today, this is March 18, we're so close to the supposed deadline. What is going to happen on March 29th?
Well, this is, at the moment, topic of much speculation. And a couple of things that's developed today means that there's not more certainty, but there's actually more uncertainty put into the picture. The wing that I'm sympathetic to and the outcome that I'm rooting for is a no-deal Brexit, and I'll explain more about that why later. But just for the sake of your readers, I'd like to, kind of explain and paint the picture of the context that British politics is in at the moment. And I think I'll start by saying we are predominantly a two-party system, and we elect with a first-past-the-post system by kind of regions and districts, which we call constituencies. And the reason why this makes us really a two-party system is because the fact that only the majority in each constituency kind of goes past, it means we either go to the centre right or the centre left. And this has been, a British democracy is a very old democracy, and there's always been, despite before 1945 when it was between the Conservatives and what was then the Whigs, the Liberals, it's now the Labour Party who are a little bit further left than that. But yeah, we have a traditional centre-right and centre-left party, and the party that is in power now is the Conservative Party. And they are not your traditional, centre-right Republican Party. They are, a kind of monarchist, slightly more patriotic, but economically liberal and generally liberal conservative party. And the reason why it looks like Britain can't agree with itself at the moment is because the party in government cannot agree with itself. The Conservative Party is so divided on this issue.
How is there even any debate on this? Because we all observe and think there was a referendum. Just do it. Why are we even debating this?
For sure. And this is something that we are at least my wing that I identify with, which is the Brexiteers, definitely see this. But unfortunately, the political reality that we're in is that 500 MPs out of 650 in that parliament voted for Remain. And these are representatives of their constituencies. And 472 out of the 650 voted to leave. That is a clear majority of constituencies in the United Kingdom voted to leave. Obviously, of the nominal United Kingdom population, it was 52% to 48. But the problem we have is that in Parliament, there is a overwhelming majority for remaining in the European Union. And the more speculative reasons for this is because it is a political and incredibly bureaucratic institution that predominantly employs retired politicians. There are a number of reasons, there are legitimate reasons to like the European Union as well. I'm not denying that. My own father is, a French-born citizen, and, he loves the idea of European federalization. Especially in the early days, it was really a bastion of liberal democracy, and it promoted, the right kind of ideas that you would expect, a good international institution to do. It promoted, nominally, although I'm going to, explain later, there's a huge amount of problems with this, free trade. It's the largest single trading bloc in the world, but that is subject to a lot of asterisks. So I'll explain that later. But, And also, it was kind of, we had all of these Eastern European bloc countries, falling from communism. We had Hungary, we had Poland, and the European Union seemed like the capitalist, the free market, the modern and liberal way, into the rest of the world. The only problem is, in reality, this is not what it is. It's a political institution that sues for more power, and there's a huge number of problems with it. But
let me just add one point there, that people who listen to the show will know that I lived for about 2 years in Guatemala. And we had a guest one time, Václav Klaus, the former president of the Czech Republic. And he gave a very interesting speech, and he discussed the current status of the European Union. And he said there are two great myths about the European Union. One is that it reflects maybe a common European community. And he says that just such a thing does not exist, that never has existed. Second, that it promotes market liberalization. He said that maybe in some senses, however, there was a great incident or a great counter example to that when Hugo Chavez was president, the late Hugo Chavez was president of Venezuela. He traveled to give a speech at the European Union, and he advocated nationalizing BP, for example. And Kraus said that at that time he got a standing ovation.
Yeah, this is one of the massive issues with the European Union. Nominally, what it's supposed to support, and then in practice, what it actually does, are two different things. And it's something that is really, really fueling, as a political entity, huge backlash all over Europe. You get these populist and kind of Eurosceptic groups in every single country now on the rise. But in terms of free trade, one thing that it does, and has always had a huge problem with, is lobbying. And according to a report not too long ago, it's on The Guardian, it said that it was estimated that 80% of policy was influenced by lobbying in the European Union. And there are a lot of domestic industries, such as, the French wine and the Italian cars and, the German manufacturing. And what they do when foreign competition arrives is that they look for common tariffs. And we have tariffs on all sorts of things in the United Kingdom as a member of the European Union. And this is a huge problem because it's a protectionist bloc.
Yeah, that's the irony. Yeah, exactly. That within the bloc, there may be open trade, but with the rest of the world, the walls are even higher than before.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not sure what your stance or what your reader's stance is on, kind of China's, market presence over here. But the arrival of Chinese steel warranted Eurofer, the European kind of steel union, to go to Brussels, go to the head lobbying office, and actually lobby for 147% tariffs, on this import steel. And whatever you think, the kind of steel consumers, which is a huge amount in Europe, this is just not economically literate. And a lot of studies, after the great liberalization in trade in the 90s, have cited that there's been an asymmetry in liberalization in the specific industry of agriculture. And who has this been to the detriment of but Africa, and specifically their development? And we have this huge protection of European farmers and it's done under the very hotly contested policy of the Common Agricultural Policy.
Yeah, let me just interject there quickly. Even my home country of New Zealand is subject to this, that until the 1970s, New Zealand was a bosom buddy of Great Britain, of course. And then, for whatever reason, I don't know what happened at that time, the British decided to go with the European Union and not with the colonies, and therefore the colonies lost a major trading partner.
Well, yeah, no, this is true. And to go off describing the European Union, one of the most positive, in my opinion, ideas to come out of Brexit is this idea of a CANZUC, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK idea, which would be a free trading zone. And it would also see, a particular return to this huge market that Britain has in the Commonwealth and all of the former colonies. And I think really that would be the way forward, because what really poisoned the European Union was the fact that all of the decision making is done by the Commission, and the Commission is appointed, not elected.
Who appoints these people?
That is an excellent question, and it's positively Kafkaesque. the European Union is not simply run. There are 5 presidents of the European Union, and most European citizens, I'd be happy to say 90% of European citizens, if there is such a thing, cannot name them. They are aware of the President of the Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, at most times, but we have so many chambers. We have the Parliament, but the Parliament in the European Union is not your typical Parliament in the way that it can't initiate the repeal of legislation. They can only vote, like Castle, on motions that have already been negotiated to pass within the big blocks in the Parliament. And you have these. You have the centre-right bloc, which is called the European People's Party, and it's a conglomeration of all of the so-called centre-right parties in Europe. And the reason why this is really, really kind of dark and it's run in a highly questionable way is because I'm not sure what your viewers know of Hungary, but Hungary's government is a very, very far right-wing and, actually a protectionist country, and it's constantly being labelled in European media as fascist. But despite all of this, it votes and is allowed to be part of the European centre-right bloc that Jean-Claude Juncker, the European Commission president, is part of. And it really tells you that a lot of these parties are coerced into towing the kind of mainstream line in the European Union. The other 2 blocs are the European Liberals and supposedly Democrats for Europe, and the Socialists and Democrats for Europe. And the only problem with this is all 3 parties are in bed with each other, and they have the same goals of European federalization, centralization, and, big government.
Every month, for nearly 50 years, Gold Newsletter has unearthed high-potential investment opportunities in metals and mining stocks that mainstream investors didn't even know existed. The value and profit potential we pack into each and every issue of Gold Newsletter make it an absolute steal at just $198 per year. Your subscription includes 2 special reports, Money Multipliers, resource stocks poised to triple, and The Investor's Guide to Gold and Silver. To subscribe, visit www.goldnewsletter.com and click subscribe now to discover how to multiply your returns in today's gold bull market.
We got two major problems here. One, the British Parliament, and to be frank, I'm not so well informed on how it functions. You've got the House of Lords and House of Commons. It's complicated.
It's predominantly unicameral in the way that the House of Lords holds very, very few power. Well, little power, but most of the motions that are passed in the Commons go through the House of Lords. Pretty much every time. So. And we also don't have a constitution in the United Kingdom, which means that there's very little that, can't be passed by Parliament that won't go into British law.
Right, yeah. For Americans, that is hard to understand that there's no written constitution, but we have the similar situation in New Zealand where we don't need one. We have basically legal traditions that are understood. So, yeah, the British Parliament does not reflect the will of the people, and they've been dragging their feet for over 2 years. And then, again, we have an extremely opaque institution called the European Union, which, in my mind, is becoming, I hate to make the comparison, but people in the United States know that there has been a great loss of federalism over the years, that rapidly the power has been accumulating in Washington, D.C. And this process in Brussels seems to be just happening at maybe 5 times the pace.
Yeah. And not only is it just accumulating in, we actually have 3 cities. We have Brussels, Luxembourg, and Strasbourg, which are all dotted around, the Belgian-France line. The huge problem with this is that even though it's centralizing, at least in Washington, Congress and the president are elected by the people. The people that are holding power in Brussels are not elected. And increasingly, the lawmakers are nameless bureaucratic civil servants that have no democratic accountability.
What motivates them? Why do they even write these laws to begin with? What are they trying to serve?
Well, because it's a career, and also because there's quite a lot of lobbying money in it. Like I said, lobbying for protection is a huge problem in the European Union. It is a very, very big problem. And if you look at least nominally at Western Europe and Europe in general, the 2 countries that are really succeeding, and this is a complete anecdote and there are other reasons for this, but the two countries that are really, really succeeding and are global powerhouse economies are Switzerland and Norway. And why is this? This is because Switzerland, it has so many, multinational corporations, and it has a huge industry in the banking industry, but not just the banking industry, in chocolate, in clothes, in every posh watch firm, in Roche, in Vartus, Nestle. There are so many huge, big player Swiss corporations. It is a very, very strong industrial country, but it trades with the rest of the world on its own terms. It is not limited by European protectionism. And Norway, obviously, it has its oil as well, but Norway is the same. It trades with the rest of the world free of European Union protectionism. And what's happening in the United States is a shame, because obviously the federalized system was a great experiment that was very successful. But what's happening in Europe is worse. And this is because the people that are holding power in the Commission, and there's also there's more chambers such as the Council of Europe that are affiliated, the European Council and the Council of the European Union, that are completely separate bodies. A study released in 2016, when the referendum was actually happening, showed that the kind of extent and the kind of, we call it the gravy train over here, which is obviously gravy is a traditional British stew, kind of liquid that we put on our meats, a kind of broth. The gravy train is really described to talk about the kind of luxury and the money being poured into the European government.
We're familiar with it, actually. There was a great documentary made prior to the referendum, which I saw and I found compelling.
Brexit movie, by any chance?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just Brexit the movie, but there was a great deal of division, of course, around this issue because among the classical liberals, many people took the line that Britain was the most liberal nation within Europe. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Maybe the Swiss are, but it went both ways.
Well, yeah, no, there's definitely a feeling about that. And we are also kind of liberated by the fact that we're an island. So we do at least think of ourselves as a separate entity rather than one that, is part of a greater whole. Maybe Germany think of themselves, or at least West Germany at least, as, the kind of, and this was very true in the 70s and the post-war era. Britain took a very centrally planned economic route, and it was actually terrible. It was a very, very stark, resounding defeat for us. Despite winning the Second World War, the fact that we weren't invaded, we didn't really have much to rebuild. We were rationing for at least 10 years after. Whereas Germany, they managed to abolish rationing within a couple of years. And not only that, but by the late 1960s, they had transferred themselves into the third strongest economy in the world. And why is this? I'm no Keynesianism, but it does actually show you Britain got 3 times the Marshall aid of West Germany. And West Germany managed to, through market economy, transform themselves into a global powerhouse. And whereas Britain, we took this centrally planned, route, and by the 70s we were having, all of these terrible things, the 3-day working week and the miners' strikes, and Britain's economy was in a terrible place. But historically, you are right. There is a great, history of liberalism in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, we would say, where is, Adam Smith from, for example, right?
Exactly, Scotland. Yeah. And if this did come back with our Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, in the 80s, and she kind of overturned the unions, who had a massive dominance in British politics, and she did a lot to combat the class system in the United Kingdom. She was born actually in my hometown of Grantham in the Midlands, which is, a remote market town that has nothing, impressive about it. But her story was one of social mobility. And, she was the daughter of a greengrocer's, and she became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the bastion of economic liberalism.
Yeah, but let's try and clarify, because I just don't think you're really resolved. Maybe because you don't know, or no one really knows. We're now 10 days out from this deadline. On that day, will the United Kingdom no longer be a part of the European Union?
At the moment, that is into British law. The law of the land still says that we leave with or without a deal on the 29th of March. This is interesting because just as early as Wednesday and Thursday, we had votes in the House of Commons, And Parliament actually voted to take the concept of a no-deal Brexit, leaving the European Union without a free trade agreement, without any agreement at all, off the table. The only issue with this is that a no-deal Brexit, as it's been dubbed, is actually the most true to what voters voted for.
Of course.
In the way that it establishes complete sovereignty for the United Kingdom, no regulatory alignment, and really Brussels and the European Union will have no say on our economic policy, our foreign policy, or any kind of judicial jurisdiction in our country either. And this is what a lot of the Conservative Party wants. A lot of the Conservative Party are for a no-deal Brexit. And today, we have these three major outcomes, which is an extension of Article 50, which is the kind of article that is Britain leaving the European Union. The British Parliament, by a huge margin, did actually vote to extend Article 50. So we want more time to negotiate with the European Union to see how we're going to leave. The only problem with this is the electorate are getting pretty damn irritated with Parliament. And, as you've said, nearly 3 years on, June, nothing productive has actually come about. And the fact that despite a no-deal scenario being closest to what voters actually picked, there's just this complete reluctance in our House to do it. But that is completely fair, and that is an oversimplification of what things actually are.
The strangest thing to me is just that right now, obviously, your Parliament has basically made a whole hash of this, and yet apparently Brexiters are the ones to blame. And that makes no sense to me.
No, that is true, and that's just the spin. I mean, Theresa May's deal was never acceptable for Brexiteers, and after the Brexit vote in the 23rd of June 2016, what it was spun by was the traditional, the white working class, the racists, the small-minded, and there's been a number of we're sick of this over here. It's so polarizing, but there's been a number of studies since that have shown that immigration was definitely on the ticket for the reasons why, because as a member of the European Union, you're asked to subscribe to, the kind of freedom of movement principle, which means that anybody from the European Union, 500 million of them, can come into your country. But the predominant reason and the core reason driving Leave voters was not immigration, it was actually sovereignty. And this is consistently, Theresa May's deal keeps the UK regulatory aligned to the European Union. The European Court of Justice can still pass laws effective on the United Kingdom, but the United Kingdom will have no say on how they're passed. We hand over, in money over to the European Union, but the only thing it does secure is freedom to deter immigration. And the fact that the deal is still massively unpopular with the Brexiteers in Parliament, massively unpopular with the public, does tell you that there's a lot more to wanting to leave this institution than just, immigration.
Yeah, I just find the way people disparage the white working class of Britain is so revealing as to basically the self-loathing of these people towards their own country. Because what's wrong? What's so wrong with being white and working class? I don't understand it.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a lot of it's snobbery, but even that is a massive oversimplification. We're constantly told that it's kind of the London elite against the rest of the country. The financial the centre of the UK against the rest of the homogenous, kind of traditional and conservative UK, but that is a massive oversimplification. London is a very large city. It's got a population of 8 million, and 40% of Londoners still voted to leave the European Union. Scotland, which has always been, politically contested with, the English-dominated Westminster in our union, Scotland still around 45% voted to leave. And it's the same, the majority of Wales, our Celtic brethren over there, voted to leave. In Northern Ireland, you have the Protestant Conservatives. Again, they are ardent leavers. So it's still a huge oversimplification about what the picture is.
Well, so right now, you don't want to give us a likelihood that this no-deal Brexit goes ahead? Well,
if you'd ask for my personal speculation, it is actually that no deal might squeak it. And that's what it's looking at now.
Oh, wow.
And there's a number of reasons. It's because Theresa May's deal is basically dead in the water. It got voted on in December, and it was the biggest defeat in British democratic history that we've ever had. It was defeated by an absolutely huge margin of over 200 votes. And then we voted on it again in March, on the 13th, I do believe. And again, it was resoundingly defeated. And we do actually have, I've said that the United Kingdom doesn't have a constitution, but we do actually have rules of the House of Commons that you can't vote on the same thing twice in the same parliamentary session. Well, she wanted to bring it back to vote on tomorrow, and the Speaker of our House rejected that. So there's now a little bit of panic from Theresa May's administration because she planned to try and push through her deal with the looming presence of the likelihood of a no-deal scenario, coming out, which the majority of Parliament is hugely opposed to. But the Speaker of the House recently rejected this. And the law of the United Kingdom does mean that we leave on the 28th of March if nothing changes currently. Yeah, so that is by default. If nothing changes now at the time of this podcast, that is by default what's going to happen.
Yeah, their own incompetence is basically they're their own worst enemy, it seems, in this situation.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we have, in the Conservative Party, we have this Eurosceptic wing called the European Research Group, and they are largely either social conservatives or free marketers, and they completely agree on the issue of the European Union. Unfortunately, in the Conservative Party, they do constitute a minority. I do believe they have around 80 or to 88 MPs, but that still makes a massive difference when the Conservative Party majority, it actually doesn't have a majority, but it's with the DUP, its majority is of about 8 MPs. So if you have 80 to 88 of your own party voting against you, you're not going to get anything passed. These people have been relatively consistent, and it looks like when Theresa May does resign, it's going to be one of these who takes power. There's a number that they're speculating over. One of them is Boris Johnson, the former mayor of London.
Yep.
This guy, you can see him on London and on YouTube, and you can see him all over the internet. He's made some, absurd comments, and he's a character, but a lot of it's just this kind of image.
Yeah, why don't you tell us though? So let's say that you right now, actually, the trajectory is that a no deal will get through, not because the Parliament wants it, just because they were so disorderly in their negotiations. Now, what does that mean for the British economy? I mean, will there be chaos at the end of this month? And what's going to happen to Northern Ireland?
Well, the term we call it is Project Fear. And the reason is we had much of the same after the referendum. We were told that on the vote to leave, there would be an economic recession. And there was all these scare stories about, the NHS, our National Health Service, collapsing because of all of the, kind of imports and all of these economic forecasts that never came to pass. What did happen was, because obviously currencies are done a lot on speculation, the value of our currency did drop. That is a fact, and no matter how much you believe in Brexit, you can't avoid that. But apart from that, there was no economic fallout. In fact, on the contrary, Britain has actually been outgrowing Germany and France, the two economic powerhouses of the European Union, in the last 2 years. And we have been pretty successful. So the British public aren't really buying a lot of the stories that, this kind of economic catastrophe is looming if we don't reach some kind of agreement.
Because media people have cried wolf too many times?
Absolutely, it's hysteria. And, I think this, I might be reading into it, completely wrong here, but my personal reading of it is the same thing happened with Donald Trump. This kind of absolute saturation of Trump critical journalism since his election has meant that the legitimate places where Trump can be criticized kind of have been drowned out in this constant hysteria of, orange man bad and all of this kind of, meme attitude.
The challenge too is that I fear, I'm not sure whether the Trump analogy is a good one, but the concern I see with the Brexit situation is that the Project Fear is distracting the British people and politicians from just getting on with actually arranging solutions, right? As you said, actually arranging trade deals with other countries.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few very, very good things that came out of Parliament that unfortunately died. One of them was this idea of a Malt House compromise that came from the MP with the name Malt House, and it tried to accumulate the wings of the Conservative Party who were pro-Remain, and it tried to come up with an alternative compromise to Theresa May's deal, and it sorted out this kind of dilemma in Northern Ireland, and it asked for a short delay of Article 50, but to prepare for a no deal. Unfortunately, it failed in the House of Commons for careerist reasons. But the other thing is the outcome of no deal. Liam Fox, our international trade secretary, came up with the idea, and this was circulating in British news not too long ago, that what they would do, one of the scenarios would be to absolutely slash tariffs. And hold on, I have it up here, but The Guardian, true to form, with their sensationalist headlines, published something like this, which I'm sure to them was something negative, but they published the headline just a week ago. UK will cut most tariffs to zero in the event of a no-deal Brexit.
Are you serious? So we should be celebrating, basically.
Exactly. To The Guardian, this is some kind of like apocalyptic scenario, but to the free marketer, you know what I mean? This is Christmas. But yeah, no, and the same with Politico. UK to cut tariffs to zero on 87% of imports in a no-deal Brexit. Another aspect of Theresa May's deal was the fact that it would see what's known as the divorce bill, in quotation marks, to the European Union. It would be £40 billion of public money, or taxpayers' money, to the European Union, to fund their projects in the UK's absence. Well, Dominic Raab, one of the up-and-coming favourites for UK Prime Minister, so watch out for that. He's a Eurosceptic, he's a free marketer. He suggested that we use that 49 billion to put tax cuts on the United Kingdom to alleviate regulatory burden and, to stimulate the economy a little bit through, lower corporate tax, lower income tax. And, this could be something that would be really good. So as long as Theresa May isn't actually at the helm, which if a no-deal Brexit actually does come to pass, I can safely predict she will not be leading the United Kingdom, because her entire career as Prime Minister has been to try and be the one who comes up with this deal that mediates both sides, that mediates the people that want to remain and mediates the people that want to leave. And what she's done is she's come up with this absolutely terrible deal that is worse than remaining full member of the European Union to many people. So, she's routinely against a no deal. She's routinely, supposedly, against remaining. So as soon as this deal dies dead in the water, I do think it will be the end of Theresa May. And luckily, the Conservative Party is likely to elect a Brexiteer in their place.
Okay, but you haven't, just before we finish up, we've been racing through the half hour. What is happening to Northern Ireland? Because I know that was a thorn in the side of this situation, because, of course, no one really wants to erect a firm border between the Republic and North.
Well, it's a really, really long border that meanders, through villages, and it even meanders across bridges in villages.
Yeah.
The analogy that's being used is what happens in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, which is an international trade hub, is that when goods from foreign markets arrive, they often do the checks, miles inland in the border. There's no need for a hard border around there, to check these products. And the idea is that, the trade going between Northern and Southern Ireland will just be checked at the nearest checkpoint. The problem is there is this kind of historical social conflict between the Protestant Anglo population, which accumulates in the north and actually the northeast of the country of Northern Ireland itself, and the Catholic Irish population. And, there was some, over the course of the 20th century, there was some very, very violent and vicious conflict there. One thing that is actually, again, you see Project Fear coming to pass again, is this kind of forecast and, a prophecy that somehow the case of a no-deal Brexit will spark this, conflict again, as if the Irish, are just sleeping on their machine guns and ready to go.
No, I think we're relatively over that at this point. I mean, as my name would attest, I'm of Irish ancestry, and I just don't see any real will to ignite a conflict again. But The one question I have in the back of my mind, and only really time will tell, I guess, is whether a no-deal Brexit would actually invite the Irish to form a closer alliance with the United Kingdom, as it maybe was historically, which I would think is a smart idea, but I don't know whether they would ever come to be.
You would definitely hope for this, and the only problem is their leader at the moment, Leo Varadkar. He has an inflated ego, to say the least. In a few interviews, he's been quoted as saying, "I am the European Union," which is just an absolute inflation of reality. But they seem to think that they have increased influence in the European Union when actually they're just being used as a ploy to kind of manipulate the Brexit process. Interesting thing about both Ireland and the UK is that they are not part of Schengen, which is, this borderless region in the European Union that means all people can work and live and, travel anywhere in the European Union. But like Britain, Ireland opted out of this. And after the Varadkar administration, maybe there is actually, a little bit of a history of Euroscepticism in Ireland as well. They voted on the Lisbon Treaty not too long ago, and which was a treaty of the European Union, in a referendum, and they actually rejected it. But true to form, the European Union its intentions are kind of contrary to democracy a lot of the time. They were forced to vote again, and obviously the vote was accepted when it went the right way. Maybe, especially if the United Kingdom does make a success of Brexit, if it takes the routes of liberalisation after leaving the European Union, if it opens up its markets to the rest of the world, if it goes down the route of a Kamzuk deal or gets in touch with the Commonwealth countries, if the United Kingdom is seen to get a lot of growth and improve its industries, then Ireland might follow suit. In that respect, all of the countries of the European Union might as well. Europe as a continent, aside from Switzerland and Norway, is in decline. From these global powerhouses, we're really clinging on to 1% growth rate. It's kind of cheered because they're not recession at the moment. But if you look at Australia, the US, Canada, it proves that first world countries, wealth is not a finite source. Wealth is created. We're not mercantilists. This kind of declining civilizational and cultural and economic attitude within the European Union is that it just needs to be mediated and that we're all going down, but they don't accept that it's their own kind of barrier attitude towards the rest of the world that is causing this. It doesn't need to be like this at all. I have a lot of optimism if we do leave without a deal. It's the best for the social cohesion of the United Kingdom by far, because this is a very, very polarizing and binary issue that does split families like mine across the table. My dad and I are very civil about it. We laugh about it. We come from different, kind of political backgrounds, but it's a very, very divisive issue. And again, we talked about the kind of sneering at the white working class in Britain. This is absolutely an issue, and it hopefully can't go on much longer. And after a no-deal Brexit, although there is a lot of, kind of division between the two groups, there's no doubt in my mind that the Remainers, the people that want to stay in the European Union, truly do want what's best for the United Kingdom as well. So hopefully if Brexit is made a success of, we'll see a lot more cohesion and a global United Kingdom rather than, a protected one.
That was such a diplomatic way to finish.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so Tom Colsy is the man. His Twitter handle is Tom Colsy 99 lower dash, but you could just go to goldnewsletter.com/podcast and you'll have all the links there. Twitter is the best place as far as I can tell to follow him. Is there anywhere else you would like to recommend people go?
No, that'll be fine.
Okay, Tom, I appreciate your time and I look forward to having you back on one of these days.
Perfect. Thank you, Fergus.
Cheers.